Good afternoon. Welcome to the Analyst. Today we'll be taking up 7 newspaper articles from the Hindu and the Indian Express and discussing them. The handout for the same will be available in the description of this video for your kind perusal. Please have a look at that. The first article that we'll take up is related to India State of Forest Report 2023, which has been released after a year's delay. The second article is related to Kuwait and the Indian diaspora in the Gulf region, as Prime Minister Modi is on a 2-day visit to Kuwait. Additionally, we'll be taking up 5 articles in the simplified which will be useful for your prelims and mains preparation. Now, the first article is related to the India State of Forest Report 2023, as the report has been released recently. The report notes that the total forest and tree cover in India has reached about 25% of India's total geographical area. So we will discuss the observations in the report, a few concerns, the impacts of deforestation on India, and the government steps in this regard. This is important in GS3 under the topics conservation, environmental degradation, and the environmental impact assessment. Now, this report is released biennially, that is, once in 2 years it is released by the Forest Survey of India. What does the latest report say? It says that the total area covered under the forests in India is about 8,27,000 square kilometers, which constitutes about 25.17% of India's total geographical area. And it includes about 21.7% of the forest cover and about 3.41% of the tree cover. Also, there are about 1.3% of scrublands in India and about 73.5% of non-forest lands in India. The report notes that the total forest and tree cover has increased as compared to the last assessment which was done in 2021. It has increased by 1,445 square kilometers approximately. When we look at the distribution of the forest cover in India, the dense forests are majorly seen in the Western Himalayas, the Northeast region, some parts of central India, and in the Western Ghats. Now, coming to the observations in the report, it includes the definitions for the forest cover as well as the tree cover in India. The forest cover includes all those lands which are equal to or more than 1 hectare in size and where the tree canopy is more than 10%. Now, what is a tree canopy? For example, this is a tree, then this will be the canopy. If you look at it from the top, it will appear like a circle, and the canopy height will be the distance from the top of the canopy to the ground. If this is a small tract of land and there are a few trees in it, then the canopy density will be the area of the canopy that is seen from the above, that is seen from the air, to the area of the land. And the forest cover includes all those areas where the tree canopy density is more than 10%. And it includes all the forest lands regardless of the ownership, regardless of the legal status. And it even includes the orchards, bamboos, the palm, that is the plantation areas as well. And the tree cover is treated as all those areas which are covered by trees, but they are outside the recorded forest areas. And the classification of the forest cover is also done on the basis of the canopy density in the report. That is, the forest is classified as the very dense forest if the tree canopy density is more than 70% in the area. And the forest is classified as a moderately dense forest if the tree canopy density is less than 70%, but it is more than 40%. And it is classified as an open forest if the tree canopy density is more than 10%, but it is less than 40% in the area. And the report has highlighted that the very dense forests, they have actually increased. It has increased by about 3,500 square kilometers in India, whereas the moderately dense forests and the open forest areas have declined by about 1,000 square kilometers each. If you look at the forest and tree cover increase, the maximum increase has been observed in the state of Chhattisgarh, followed by the states of Uttar Pradesh, Odisha, and then Rajasthan. The increase in the forest cover has been observed maximum in Mizoram, followed by the states of Gujarat and Odisha. The largest forest and tree cover presently in India is there in the state of Madhya Pradesh, followed by Arunachal Pradesh and then by Maharashtra. The largest forest cover in India is there in the state of Madhya Pradesh, followed by Arunachal Pradesh and then by Chhattisgarh. The percentage of forest cover, that is the area covered by the forest to the total area of the land there, that is the total geographical area of the state, is there maximum in Lakshadweep, followed by Mizoram and then by Andaman and Nicobar Islands. The area covered under the bamboo plantations has also increased. It has increased by about 5,000 square kilometers in India. The mangroves area has gained in the states of Maharashtra and Andhra Pradesh. The report has noted that we have created an additional carbon sink because the forests, they sequester carbon also, and we have created an additional carbon sink of about 2.29 billion tons. That is this much carbon sink we have created. And the NDC targets, that is the nationally determined contributions targets under the Paris goals, were to achieve about 2.5 to 3 billion tons of carbon sink by 2030, and we are ahead of the track. When we look at the mangrove cover in India, the report has noted the maximum mangrove cover presently is there in the state of West Bengal, followed by Gujarat, followed by Andaman and Nicobar Islands, followed by Andhra Pradesh. Now the report has noted that in some areas the forest cover has declined, and the negative changes can be attributed to the reasons like the harvesting of short rotation plantations or other forms of logging, that is cutting of trees in those areas, the practices of shifting cultivation or the slash and burn agriculture, etc., and the human activities such as the encroachment of the forest lands. The natural calamities like storms, floods and landslides have also contributed to the degradation of forests in certain areas. And the titles given to the beneficiaries, that is the patta rights which are granted under the Forest Rights Act 2006, has also led to the decline in forest cover in some regions. The report has also noted that the positive changes, that is the increase in the forest cover in some regions, can be attributed to the reasons like natural growth of vegetation, often due to the conservation efforts, the establishment of new vegetation through the afforestation initiatives, for example, the Compensatory Afforestation Fund Act, the improved protection measures in plantation and the traditional forest areas to protect the forest, to conserve the forest, the increase in the trees growing outside the designated forest areas, that is the trees growing on their own, and the regeneration of areas under the shifting cultivation. But there are certain concerns as well, which the report has also noted. For example, the mangrove cover has been lost in the state of Gujarat, followed by the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. The Western Ghats have also lost the forest cover. It has lost about 58 square kilometers of forest as compared to a decade ago, that is since 2013, and it is one of the most ecologically sensitive zones. The Northeast in particular has seen a continuous decline in the forest cover as observed in the states of Nagaland, Tripura and Meghalaya. Also, the moderately dense forest and the open forest both have seen a decline in the forest cover by approximately 1000 square kilometers each. The canopy has also degraded, that is the moderately dense forests, they have become open forests at some places, for example in Mizoram, followed by Rajasthan and then Telangana. There is another concern that the plantations are also included in counting of the forest cover. But there are environmentalists who say that it should not be done because the plantations, they lack the underground biomass development that helps in the sequestration of carbon. Therefore, it should not be included in the definition of forest cover. Additionally, the guidelines of the T.N. Godavarman judgment should be followed. It was a landmark judgment by the Supreme Court which expanded the definition of the forest cover to include all the definitions in the dictionary definition, that is the reserved forest, protected forest or otherwise, everything should be included, and state expert committees should be formed and their proposals should be considered by the government. Also, there was a judgment earlier this year where the Supreme Court reiterated regarding the 2023 amendments to the Forest Conservation Act 1980, that the all-encompassing dictionary meaning to the forest will continue to hold until the states and union territories prepare a consolidated record of the forest lands. Additionally, the Environment Ministry should issue a circular in this regard to the states to ensure compliance with the T.N. Godavarman judgment, and even the establishment of the zoos or safaris that should have the final approval of the Supreme Court beforehand. Now, what are the impacts of the loss of forest, the impacts of deforestation in India? We can represent this in the form of a map also, giving specific examples. For example, it leads to the loss of biodiversity. Because the forests, they are ecologically sensitive zones. They provide habitats to various kinds of fauna. And if the forests are degraded, if the forests are lost, it will lead to the habitat destruction and it will lead to the loss of biodiversity. For example, in the Western Ghats, the declining population of the lion-tailed macaque. Likewise, it will disrupt the water cycle, because the forests, they aid in the cloud formation, they aid in the groundwater recharge, and due to the loss of forests in the floodplains of Ganga, Yamuna, etc., it has led to the decline in the water levels in the region. It leads to the soil erosion also, because the loss of forests contributes to landslides, for example, as is observed in the Himalayan region, and ultimately it leads to the land degradation and soil erosion as well. Likewise, it leads to a faster global warming, because the forests, they act as the carbon sinks, and if there is logging, if there is deforestation, ultimately that sequestered carbon will be released back into the air. And the livelihoods shall also be lost, because there are certain tribes, certain communities which are dependent upon the forest for their livelihood, and it will lead to the loss of their livelihoods and their displacement. For example, the displacement of Baigas in Madhya Pradesh. The deforestation will also lead to a disruption in the local climate. For example, the loss of green cover in Bangalore, it has led to the increase in the temperatures locally, because the loss of forest cover, the loss of green cover leads to the creation of the urban heat islands, etc. And it increases the risk of the floods, because the forests, they act as the natural sponges which absorb the extra water during the times of flood and aggravates the risk of flood. For example, as observed in the floods of Kerala in 2018. Additionally, the forest cover, the trees, they act as the natural air purifiers, and the deforestation leads to the increase in air pollution as observed in Delhi because of the loss of the forest cover in the Aravalli region. Now, what are the steps that the government has taken to counter deforestation, to increase the forest cover in India? Through the Indian Forest Act 1927, the government is empowered to declare any area as a reserved forest, as a protected forest, or even as a village forest. And through the Forest Conservation Act of 1980, the diversion of the forest land for the non-forest purposes has been prohibited. Through the Forest Rights Act 2006, the rights of the indigenous communities living in the forest, the rights of the tribals living in the forest has been protected, and simultaneously the conservation efforts are taken up, for example, the protection of Niyamgiri Hills and the rejection of the Vedanta mining project. Through the National Forest Policy 1988, the government strives to ensure that 1/3 of India's total geographical area should be under the forest cover. And every project that is taken up that involves any forest degradation or the deforestation has to pass through the environmental impact assessment, that is the EIA test. Also, the National Green Tribunal provides for compensation to the victims of environmental degradation. The Compensatory Afforestation Fund has also been put in place to ensure that any corporates who are forced to engage in deforestation, if they are not able to take up compensatory afforestation in other areas, then they have to deposit a certain amount of money in the compensatory afforestation fund that will be used for the protection, conservation and the regeneration of forest areas. When we look at the government initiatives specific to mangroves, there is the initiative of mangrove planting and regeneration, which seeks to integrate the scientific knowledge, tourism management strategies, and the social awareness programs to ensure the sustainable development of the mangroves in the coastal region. There is the Integrated Coastal Zone Management Program, under which the several NGOs, communities and government projects are focused on the planting of mangroves to restore the degraded sites. Ecotourism is promoted by the government, and the mangrove forests, they can provide a sustainable source of income through ecotourism, inspiring the environmental protection and positively influencing the local community, promoting them to participate in the conservation of mangroves also. The MISTI initiative, that is the Mangrove Initiative for Shoreline Habitats and Tangible Income, envisages to comprehensively explore the possible area for the development of mangroves, and it is spread across 11 states and 2 union territories during the 5 years commencing from fiscal year 24 onwards. Now there is a mains question also. The India State of Forest Report 2023 highlights the trends related to the forest cover. Discuss the key concerns arising from the report regarding the degradation of India's forests. What steps has the government taken to address these concerns? Please try to write it. Now, the next article is related to Kuwait and the Indian diaspora, especially in the Gulf region, as Prime Minister Modi is on a visit to Kuwait. This is important in GS2 under the topic Effect of Policies and Politics of Developed and Developing Countries on India's Interests and Indian Diaspora. Now first let's look at the map of Kuwait. Kuwait is located in the Gulf region and it shares its boundary with Persian Gulf. It shares its boundary with the countries of Iraq and Saudi Arabia. It also shares a maritime boundary with Iran. And it is a largely arid desert region except El Zahra, which is an oasis. When we look at this visit by Prime Minister Modi, it is like a diplomatic milestone for us, as it is after 4 decades that an Indian Prime Minister is visiting Kuwait. Earlier, it was the then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi in 1981 who visited Kuwait. We have historical ties with Kuwait and we have trade relations as well. Until 1961, the Indian rupee was even a legal tender in Kuwait, and we also export significantly to Kuwait. The Indian exports to Kuwait are approximately $2 billion. And simultaneously, we get investments from Kuwait. The Kuwait Investment Authority has investments of about $10 billion in India. Additionally, we need Kuwait for our energy needs. 3% of India's crude oil and natural gas needs are met from Kuwait, and Kuwait is a renowned oil supplier. It has about 6% of the world's proven oil reserves as well. This visit will be important for strengthening our bilateral ties, as there will be discussions upon the areas including energy and trade. Prime Minister Modi will be visiting and meeting the Crown Prince as well as the Prime Minister of Kuwait. There will be discussions on the bilateral investment treaty and the proposal for a defense cooperation pact as well. There will be delegation level talks on these matters. There is the initiative for engaging with diaspora. For diaspora engagement, there is a grand cultural event which is planned, that is Hala Modi in Kuwait. And also it is an opportunity for us for boosting our relations with the GCC, that is the Gulf Cooperation Council. The Kuwait is the current chair of GCC, and India is even exploring signing of a free trade agreement with the GCC currently. And there is an emphasis upon the labor welfare in this visit, as a visit has been planned to a labor camp as well for Prime Minister Modi. And that reason is part of our extended neighborhood, and therefore for extended our regional influence in the region, we will be looking at this visit closely. Now let's also look at the Indian diaspora also in the region, because Prime Minister Modi has called the Indian diaspora in the region as a mini Hindustan there. Therefore, let's look at the role, the significance of Indian diaspora. The diaspora is important for us for promoting Indianness, for promoting the brand of India. From red carpets to cuisines, for example, the Bollywood stars, they walk the red carpets, spreading the Indian culture throughout the globe, and the Indian chefs, they promote the Indian cuisines throughout the world, promoting that reverse globalization as well. And it is important for getting investments. The diaspora invests in India, that helps us in gaining forex reserves as well. And the diaspora helps in promoting the Indian motto of vocal for local. For example, the Indian brands from tea to textiles, they are promoted by the Indian diaspora outside India as well. We receive remittances from the diaspora. We receive about 3% of GDP through the remittances from the diaspora. About 13% of the global remittances are given to India. And it is important for diplomacy also, as we have diaspora at influential positions also. For example, Kamala Harris, who even ran for presidency in USA, Sundar Pichai, etc. And such influential diaspora can be utilized for exercising a soft power, a diaspora diplomacy as well. And the diaspora is important for us for research and innovation as well. For example, the contributions through the Vaibhav Summit. But there are certain challenges that the diaspora faces. The Indian diaspora, it is heterogeneous in nature. Some of them are highly skilled professionals, whereas the others are participating in the low skilled jobs, labor, etc. also. And therefore, they have differential needs. For example, the diaspora in the Gulf needs welfare from the side of India, whereas the diaspora in the wealthier nations, the Western nations, they need more investment opportunities to create more wealth, to multiply wealth. The regulatory cholesterol that they face, not only in India but also across the globe, that also is a challenge for them, as the clearances are delayed, there is red tape involved, and they often face the hurdle of protectionism in the host countries. For example, the Nitakat law in Saudi Arabia. The Nitakat law in Saudi Arabia requires the foreign companies who are operating in Saudi Arabia to employ Saudi nationals also. It acts like a protectionist measure and like a curb upon the employment of foreign nationals in those countries. And there are victims of sectarian conflicts also. The Indian diaspora, it becomes an unwanted victim in the conflicts between Shias and Sunnis in the Gulf region, the Hamas-Israel conflict, etc. And they also face discrimination. They face a social isolation. They face exploitation at the hands of their employers. For example, the kafala system, which is practiced in several Gulf countries. The kafala system is a system where the labor is bonded to their employer, and they even usurp their passports also, and they work like bonded labor over there, and they become victims of exploitation. Likewise, there is the recruitment of Indian diaspora in conflict zones also, and they become victims there. For example, in the Gulf region also, in Russia-Ukraine crisis also. Now, what are the steps that the government has taken to improve the position of Indian diaspora? The government came up with the scheme Overseas Citizenship of India scheme in 2005. As per this, the foreign nationals of Indian origin, they can apply for a lifelong visa to visit India, and they can visit any time, any number of times, and the duration of stay will also not matter. The Pravasi Bharatiya Divas is also celebrated on 9th of January to ensure the protection and to celebrate the Indian diaspora. The Pravasi Bharatiya Bima Yojana 2006 was put in place by the government. As per this, the insurance is mandatory for the ECR category migrants. The ECR category are those migrants who require an immigration check, that is immigration check required migrants, that is the migrants who wish to migrate abroad but they do not have adequate educational qualifications. For example, they have not cleared matriculation examination, and they may be probable victims of exploitation if they go abroad. For them, the protector of immigrators gives a certificate and clears the ECR for them to emigrate. The Madad portal was launched by the Ministry of External Affairs, that is, the Ministry of External Affairs in the aid of diaspora in distress. It is an online portal for the consular grievance redressal. The Pravasi Bharatiya Sahayata Kendras were established by the government in various countries, especially the Gulf region. The Know India program is a program which is targeted at the diaspora, the young Indian diaspora from the age of 18 years to 30 years, for them to understand their roots from India, to know the contemporary India. The Indian Community Welfare Fund was also established to spend for the welfare of the Indian diaspora abroad. Now there is a mains practice question also. Kuwait holds significant strategic, economic and cultural importance for India. Discuss the significance of the multifaceted relationship between India and Kuwait, highlighting the role of Indian diaspora in strengthening the bilateral ties. Please try to write it. Now the next article is related to wealth tax. This is important in GS3 under the topic Indian economy and issues related to planning, mobilization of resources, growth, development and employment. Now what is a wealth tax? The wealth tax essentially is a direct tax. It is imposed upon the assets. The assets may include cash, property, shares, etc. That is, it is imposed upon an individual who has assets more than a certain limit. This idea goes way back. India enacted the Wealth Tax Act in 1957, but the collections were less and ultimately the wealth tax was abolished in 2015. Now there are calls again from certain quarters to reimpose the wealth tax. Also, the EU Tax Observatory has recommended that there should be a global minimum tax of wealth of about 2%. There are arguments in favor of imposition of wealth tax as well. For example, it is argued that it may reduce the inequality in wealth. Based upon the total assets that an individual holds, every year 2% or 3% wealth tax may be imposed. It will lead to a reduction in inequality. It may be used for the funding of the public expenditure, because essentially taxation is done for the redistribution of resources also in a country, and it may discourage the hoarding. If the wealth is taxed at a certain rate, then the individuals may actually be motivated to invest in productive investments rather than hoarding their assets. And it is also argued that it is the moral responsibility also for the rich to contribute to the society, since they are also the beneficiaries of the utilization of resources in the country. But there are arguments against the wealth tax also. For example, if the wealth tax is imposed in India, it may lead to a flight of the high net worth individuals from India. They will go to safe havens, they will go to such countries where the wealth tax is not imposed. And the compliance cost for the imposition of the wealth tax is high, and the collections are meager, and therefore it had to be abolished in 2015, and the remarks of the then Finance Minister Arun Jaitley also echoed the same. Plus there are disputes in the valuation of the assets, and the rich people, they have the resources to show that the assets they hold, they are less, and the existing tax rates are already sufficiently high. We are imposing extra taxes on the super rich individuals. We have extra cess also on top of that. Plus the efficiency of other taxes is better than the imposition of the wealth tax. Therefore, the collection rates there, the yield of the tax there is better than the wealth tax as compared to the collection cost. And it may harm the consumption also. For the upper class, the upper middle class especially, the consumption patterns may change because of the imposition of the wealth tax. Now coming to the article, it has argued that it is an old idea. For example, it was introduced in Switzerland way back in 1840, and then in India it was introduced in 1957. But if we see the latest trend, the wealth tax imposition in the various countries has been declining. For example, the OECD countries who impose the wealth tax, it has declined from 12 countries in 1990 to 4 countries in 2017. Now there is a renewed conversation on the reimposition of the wealth tax because of the debate upon inequality, rising inequality. For example, the noted economist Thomas Piketty has highlighted that the inequality in India is such that the top 1% in India, they account for 22% of the total income and 40% of the total wealth. And this inequality seems more pronounced after the COVID. And they have argued that a 2% annual tax on the net wealth of those who hold more than 10 crore wealth in India, they should be imposed, and a 33% inheritance tax may also be imposed upon the individuals who have inherited more than 10 crore in the assets. But there are difficulties in the implementation, as the author has also noted that it will lead to high administrative costs, excessive litigation, and they tend to raise little revenue because the rich people, they have enough resources to game the system. And there are creative ways also that they use, and therefore it was abolished earlier in India also, because the twin objectives that were sought to be achieved through the imposition of the wealth tax in India were not achieved. That is, to reduce unequal distribution of wealth, but still the inequality in wealth kept on rising. Simultaneously, to assist the states in financing their development schemes, because the revenues, the collection from the wealth tax imposition were less, therefore it had to be abolished. And if we look at today's globalized world, the mobility is high, and the high net worth individuals, they will flee to other countries, settle in other countries to escape such high taxes in India. And reports also suggest that after Norway increased the wealth tax there, many high net worth individuals in Norway also left the country. And in 2023 itself, around 5,000 Indian millionaires have already left the country and relocated abroad. Therefore, the author suggests that India should not reimpose the wealth tax. Now, the next article is related to quantum satellite. This is important in GS3 under the topic Achievements of Indians in Science and Technology and the Indigenization of Technology. India plans to launch a quantum satellite in the next 2 or 3 years for quantum communications. This will be a part of the National Quantum Mission. The National Quantum Mission is under the Department of Science and Technology, and it got the approval of the Union Cabinet in April 2023. And it will be using quantum physics for the next generation communication and sensing systems. The classical physics that is used in the classical models of computation, that is based upon the binaries of 0 and 1, whereas the quantum computing, which uses the quantum mechanics, we can think of it in the terms of qubits. The classical bits, they code information in the form of 0 and 1, whereas the qubits, we can think of it like a sphere, and it can denote any information between 0 and 1 also, rather than only the binaries of 0 and 1. Therefore, the computation powers in the quantum computing will be of several magnitudes higher than the classical computing, and this will move beyond the performance limits of the classical physics. And therefore, the National Quantum Mission will help in the development of the quantum computers, communication systems, and sensors, etc. This will foster the innovations in newer technologies like telecommunications, artificial intelligence, drug discovery, etc. And the promotion of quantum satellite will also help in securing our communications. Because in communications, the communication is sent through the signals, and those signals, they can be intercepted by a third person also. To ensure security in that, they are usually encrypted. And a communication satellite, that will be our quantum satellite, will be using quantum physics for the security purposes, and it will secure the signals against interception. And for this purpose, it will be using the quantum cryptography and quantum key distribution. Now, how are these messages secured? For that, the article itself presents a good example that the cryptographic security can be used, and the cryptographic security works by hiding the secret code or a key behind an extremely difficult mathematical problem. Now, a bad actor, a person who seeks to snoop on a conversation, can solve the problem with a powerful computer to reveal the code. But harder the problem, the more time, more computing resources will be needed. Therefore, if we have the quantum capabilities, we can go for more secure encryptions, and the messages so encrypted will be done using secret codes. For example, WhatsApp uses 256-bit encryption, and the encryption will hide the message content using complex algorithms. Now these quantum computers that will develop, they will potentially crack the current encryption methods also. If the other countries possess such technologies, they will be able to intercept our communications, and we won't be able to encrypt them using such powerful tools. The quantum cryptography and security uses the quantum key distribution, and it is done by sharing the secure keys. That is, the key is shared with both the sender and the receiver. If anybody in between tries to intercept the key, the qubit will change its profile, and therefore everybody will come to know that the key has been discovered by someone, and the eavesdropping gets detected through the quantum measurement. And the quantum entanglement is another way to ensure the security of the message that is used for the conversation. The implementation of the quantum key distribution, if we see, it is still about a decade away for its full implementation. But China is having a quantum key distribution network. It is the largest in the world with 3 quantum satellites, and now there are ongoing efforts to extend the distance through which we can use the quantum key distribution. We want to extend it to hundreds of kilometers, and for this it has been identified that the Indian Astronomical Observatory at Hanle in Ladakh, that will be ideal for a satellite based quantum key distribution. But there are certain drawbacks also of the quantum key distribution. One of the drawbacks will be there will be a lack of transmission source authentication, and since it will be hardware based, it will be difficult to upgrade the technology or use patchworks for decoding that information, and the infrastructure cost will also be high. There may be insider threats also. If an insider gets access to the keys, then he will be able to access the information, and the security is limited by the hardware and engineering designs, not purely by the quantum laws, and they will become vulnerable to the denial of service attacks also. For example, if the key is sought to be tampered or intercepted by a third individual, then the eavesdropping will naturally be detected, and the information will not be passed on at all, and there will be a break of communication, and hence there will be a denial of service attack just because of the interception or the eavesdropping attempt by a bad actor. Now, the next article is related to the United Nations Internal Justice Council. As the former Supreme Court Judge Madan Lokur was appointed in the Internal Justice Council of United Nations. This is important in GS2 under the topic Important International Institutions, Agencies and Fora, their structure and mandate. The United Nations Internal Justice Council essentially is for the staff members of United Nations. It was established by the United Nations General Assembly. What does it do? It ensures the independence, professionalism and accountability in the administration of justice system of the United Nations. It comprises of 5 members. One member is a representative of the staff, another member is a representative of the management, and there are 2 distinguished external jurists. One is nominated by the staff and another one by the management. And the chairman is a distinguished jurist who is chosen by the consensus among the 4 other members. The Internal Justice Council members are appointed by the United Nations Secretary General. It performs one more function. It searches for the suitable candidates for the positions of judges to be appointed in the United Nations Dispute Tribunal and the United Nations Appellate Tribunal. Now, the other 4 members in the United Nations Internal Justice Council are from the countries Uruguay, Australia, Austria and the USA. They would be responsible for handling the administration of the UN's internal justice system, which includes the Office of Staff Legal Assistance, the United Nations Dispute Tribunal and the UN Appeals Tribunal. What is the Office of Staff Legal Assistance? Essentially, it provides the legal advice and representation to the staff of UN, the former staff and the dependents of UN who wish to appeal an adverse decision taken by their employer or who are subject to disciplinary action. So essentially, this Office of Staff for Legal Assistance comprises of qualified attorneys and courtroom advocates who provide the legal advice to the UN staff members. The UN Disputes Tribunal, this acts as the first instance court, which is approached by the aggrieved staff members of UN, and it comprises of 9 permanent judges. 3 of the judges are full-time, remaining 6 judges are half-time judges. The 3 full-time judges are located in Geneva, Nairobi, and New York. These judges have a single non-renewable term of 7 years, that is, they cannot be reappointed. And the judgments that they deliver, they are binding if it is related to the administrative decision that is being challenged. And the decisions of the UN Dispute Tribunal, it is appealed before the UN Appeals Tribunal. Now, the next article is related to National Commission on Scheduled Tribes. This is important in GS2 under the topic Appointments to various constitutional posts, powers, functions, and responsibilities of various constitutional bodies. The National Commission on Scheduled Tribes, it was established in 2004. It is a constitutional body that was established through the 89th Constitutional Amendment, which inserted the Article 338A in the Constitution. Through this amendment, the National Commission on Scheduled Caste was replaced by 2 commissions, that is the National Commission on Scheduled Caste and the National Commission on Scheduled Tribes. When we look at the composition of National Commission for Scheduled Tribes, the members have 3-year term. It comprises of a chairman. The rank of the chairman is equivalent to a union cabinet minister. It comprises of a vice chairman also. The rank of the vice chairman is equivalent to the Minister of State. And the members, their rank is equivalent to the secretary in the Government of India. Now, what are the functions of the National Commission on Scheduled Tribes? It is contained under the Article 338A subclause 5. It monitors the safeguards which are provided for the scheduled tribes under the Constitution and the various other laws, statutes enacted by the Parliament. It inquires into the specific complaints relating to the rights and the safeguards of the scheduled tribes. It advises in the planning process related to the socio-economic development of the scheduled tribes. It also submits a report to the President annually. It submits the report to the President annually and other times on welfare measures required related to the socio-economic development of the scheduled tribes. It discharges such other functions in relation to the scheduled tribes as the President may by rule specify. Now, coming to the article, the scheduled tribes in India, they face several issues. The most common complaint from the people from the ST communities is that they are denied the rights to their forest lands, denied the issuance of the forest pattas, the land issues that they face, the service matter issues that they face. And also there is a particular issue that the temple managements, they are not following the mandated rules on reservation and addressing the complaints of the ST employees. There are demands that the SCs and STs, they should be considered for the religious posts in the temples, and they should also be adequately informed regarding the stipend scheme of the Tirupati also for the studying of the Vedas, the lack of reservation in the shops and hawker license that should be addressed as well. Now, the next article is related to the amendment in the conduct of election rules. This is important in GS2. The government has amended the Rule 93 subclause 2 subclause A of the 1961 conduct of election rules. The rule earlier stated that all the other papers relating to the election shall be open to public inspection. Now it has been amended to read that all other papers as specified in these rules relating to the election shall be open to public inspection. Now this has amounted to the restriction of public access to a section of the poll documents. This has come after a recent direction to the Election Commission by the Punjab and Haryana High Court to share all the documents related to the Haryana Assembly elections, including the CCTV footage as well. Now, what has been the Election Commission opinion in this regard? The Election Commission has said that the rule mentions election papers and does not specifically refer to electronic records. In order to remove this ambiguity, the rule has been amended to safeguard the misuse of CCTV footage from inside the polling stations. But now there is a controversy over the voter turnout in the recent Lok Sabha and the assembly polls, etc. And the access to the presiding officer's diaries, which contain the detailed data of voter turnout at different points of time, that would have been useful. The number of tokens that they distribute to voters who are in queue at the hour scheduled for closing of polling, they are not mentioned specifically in the conduct of election rules. Now, if someone files a right to information application under the RTI Act 2005, they may not get access to this also, yet access to such documents is crucial to assess whether the elections were fair and free in India. Thank you.